And welcome live to the LV Home Experts Radio Show. Today we got a very special guest. If this is your first time tuning in to this channel, I just want to say welcome. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button either when y'all have a chance. So today we got a lot of things to cover. We got a very special guest here. We have an attorney. We're going to be talking about just general real estate, probates, how to quiet title, what's that all about, evictions, HOA laws, and if you should actually have a will, trust, or if you want to plan for an estate. So there's a lot to cover here. However, give me just a second, guys. Here we go. So let's get right into it because we got so much to talk about, and this is such a fascinating story of just real estate and law in general. So we have a very special guest. His name is Adam Tripedi. It's such a hard name to remember. Right. I'm always destroying everybody's last name, Dan. It's Tripedi, correct? Tripedi. So you guys already know Dan French would guarantee, right? I don't have to introduce him. You guys already know who this guy is.
Oh, yeah.
How was your weekend, Dan?
Oh, it was amazing.
What would you do? What was memorable to you?
Memorable. Well, I had some pigeons, man, that had like a nest or started to develop a nest above my door.
Okay. Above your door or your parents' door?
No, my door.
Okay.
So I had to go get spikes, had to pull out all the crap that they started building up there. I looked out. It's funny because I looked out over. I was like, wait a second. I didn't put that there. Oh. And all of a sudden, like a little bit. I mean, we all knew birds came in, but I didn't think they were going to be like setting up shop there.
Yeah.
So I had to go and clean that out, man. That was my highlight,
One thing I noticed about pigeons, right? Once they come and they lay eggs, they always fly back to its original spot and it stays there until you do something with it.
Well, you got to just, like I did. You're 100% right. Yeah. They didn't lay eggs, but dude, they've been hovering my house. It's like I walk out and they're like looking at me like, what's he going to do? Where, what's going to happen over here? Like, can I get in or can I not get in? I sprayed them with water.
And they still came back.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you put on spikes. And I know this for a fact because I literally spent about $2,200 to get rid of some pigeons, believe it or not.
That's a lot of money.
No, it is.
$2,200.
$2,200 to
Dude,
put on
how bad
some
was your pigeon problem?
I mean, it was bad. I mean, I had the property for 10 years. And, certain homes, the way that they're designed with the eaves and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If there's a little bit shade, some of these birds will go in and create a nest, right? For protection, obviously, and from the shade from, the sun. But the problem is that it's been years. So what they do is they bring debris, they crap all over, which is hazardous to your health, right? In addition to that, when they lay more eggs, they constantly come back to the same place. No matter how many times you shoot them or you shoot them with a BB gun, they will always come back. So the only way to combat that is you literally have to put spikes. And the spikes that I was putting on there, it was like $15 or $20 just a foot. So imagine.
For a little strip.
Yeah, it was actually $2,200.
You did the metal or the plastic?
No, I did the metal.
Okay.
So obviously I wanted the top notch too.
Yeah.
But what's funny is the area that it would always flock to, I put it there, right? And I had to call the exterminating guys again because it went somewhere else on my home.
That's what I'm saying. They just that's like so there's a store. Mm-hmm. And I think people are feeding these pigeons because you go there and there's like 50 of them on top of a roof where there's a chevron. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I'm like, okay, I know where they're coming from.
Yeah.
But I was going to say this. Somebody brought up that they eat pigeons. I no joke. Like they won't eat those pigeons.
Is it quails or pigeons?
No, pigeons.
Oh.
Yeah. And actually they're part of the dove family.
Yeah.
So, but they ate them, but I wouldn't eat those because they're a little skinny. You know what I mean? They got to get a little fat on them,
All right. So, Adam, how was your weekend?
That was a perfect segue into lawyers. And,
I know. So what did you end up doing this weekend?
So I spent some time with the family. I mean, not as exciting as the pigeon story, but spent some time with my wife, my daughter, and
that's nice.
my parents.
Very memorable.
Yeah.
So you're married. You have a wife. How old's your daughter?
My daughter is 3, almost 3.5 now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's like the cutest ages right there. That's the fun age.
Amazing right now. Her name is Carmela. We call her Lala.
Ooh, I love that name, Carmelo.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're originally where? From New York, right?
I'm from Brooklyn, New York originally. I've been out here.
Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, the real deal.
Okay. How'd you get out here, though?
So I was a kid. I was 11 years old. My parents decided they were going to come out here. We already had some family out here.
Yeah.
And we moved out here in 94. My father, New York's expensive and it's cold and it's nasty. And at the time, there was a lot of crime there. So he was like, I got to get out of here. So we came out here in 94. He bought some land. He opened up an auto shop.
Okay.
Out on Rainbow and Russell, still there. R&R Automotive, shout out. So, any automotive needs.
Yeah.
Nice.
They take care of it. My brother still runs a shop to this day, so it's like a family business. There's a convenience store. I worked there for about 7 years. So, yeah, we put in blood, sweat, and tears over there. It's still there. So that's how we wound up.
And how long have you been a lawyer?
So I've been a lawyer about 11 years. I could tell you the whole story if you want about that.
Oh, we got time.
You got time? Okay.
Just a quick, so that way people get
Start
to really know.
Start year 1 and then transfer. I'm just playing.
From the front, I put on my first pair of diapers. And,
it's like the Truman Show.
I don't know. I just I went to UNLV for undergrad. I went to UNLV for law school, and so I still have a little bit of an accent, but.
Little bit. You got a lot.
All right. But I consider myself a local,
You are a local now, though.
Been here since 94, 28 years. It's a long time. So, and then I say 11 years practicing, but really the first year was clerking for a judge. What that means in English is I consider it like an internship.
Yeah.
I worked actually in the courthouse for a full year, and there's 2 great things that came from that. The first is I met the judge, fantastic guy.
Okay.
I learned a lot from him. He's still my mentor. The other thing is, what's interesting, you work in the courthouse, you're in the courtroom.
Yeah.
So I was in the courtroom for a year. So what you see is you learn a lot. You learn what do good lawyers do.
Yeah.
More importantly, or as importantly, you learn what do bad lawyers do.
Mm-hmm.
Things that would persuade the judge or things that the judge might not like. For instance, judges don't like when lawyers come into the courtroom and scream at each other or, act like kids or tattletale on each other. They don't want to hear that.
Does that normally happen?
All the time.
Oh, wow.
You'd be shocked.
All
the time. I mean, maybe not screaming. Judges won't tolerate that, but, bickering is a good way to put it. I don't do divorce law, but I imagine, that's much worse.
What a headache, huh?
Yeah, so it is. So I was telling some friends of mine over the weekend, I hung out with some friends, and, it's being a lawyer. What's unique to it?
Mm-hmm.
It's the only job, not the only job, because there's other jobs, but it's one of the few jobs where you have someone on the other side of you that's trying to screw you over every second, waiting for every misstep. I could think of like an athlete, maybe a quarterback gets intercepted or something. But, as a real estate agent, I don't know if there's anyone actively trying to sabotage you from selling that house.
Yeah.
Maybe someone tries to steal your listing, but that's what's unique and interesting about my job. One of the things that's unique and interesting is just the adversarial nature of it.
So why did you get into real estate law?
So I graduated. I clerked for the judge for a year. I got out, and I said, what do I do? So I found a job working in a law firm that specializes in construction law, construction defect. So that, that was interesting.
Oh, one of those guys, huh?
Yeah, it was okay. I learned a lot. It was a valuable experience, but I knew it's not what I want to do forever.
Yeah.
So I segued from there. I said, well, what do I want to do? And construction law is related, obviously, to real estate.
Yes.
So I would do some things that are related to real estate. And I started, sometimes we'd have to go look up on the assessor's site, who owns this piece of property and all that kind of stuff. And I had never been exposed to that. So I go on the assessor's site. I started looking up property, and I realized, wow, I can look up any piece of property in the entire county and see who owns it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. Maybe, if you have real estate agents listening, of course, they'll know that. But I don't think a lot of people realize that you have that ability.
Yeah, it's public record.
You don't have that everywhere.
Really?
I don't think you can go, I think there's certain places, certain jurisdictions where you can't just see who owns every single piece of property in a second or, find out the entire history of the property. So that was really cool. And so something about that clicked with me. I said, well, this is interesting. Who owns this? Who owns the MGM Grand? Who owns the Veer Towers? Whatever. All these, or these giant luxury homes. Who owns that home, I wonder? And and so from there, something about that sparked an interest in real estate. So I went and joined a firm that specialized in real estate.
Okay.
And the most interesting thing that came out of that experience, I was there about 5 years.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the whole HOA foreclosure thing that went on for 10 years? Okay, so that was like an earthquake from a lawyer perspective, and for a certain segment of investors, that was a huge deal. I mean, to this day, I don't think a lot of people realize what was going on there with HOA foreclosures. That, first of all, that an HOA can foreclose if you don't pay your assessments. Yeah. And second of all, that at the time, they could wipe out the first deed of trust, the mortgage. Yeah. So you could have I've seen them as low as in the hundreds of dollars, a $500 assessment, delinquency. Yeah. Wipe out a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 mortgage. Mm-hmm. And I mean, to 99% of people, that's ludicrous. That's insane. Yeah. How could that be? But that's the way the law was written. So, I represented investors. We did hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of those quiet title lawsuits, we call them. And, that was fascinating. There was a lot of law that was made. And in English, what that means is that we went up to the Nevada Supreme Court, whole bunch of dozens and dozens of cases, and that we changed the laws.
So, Trilaw. Yeah. When did you open your own firm here?
So,
because obviously you had to make that transition.
Right. So I worked at that firm for about 5 years. Yeah. And then I said, you know what? I've got the experience now. I've got the know-how. I've got the connections and everything else. I've got the wherewithal. I can do this. And I decided, why am I, going to make money for somebody else? Okay. When I can open my own firm, I know I can do it, and I know I'll succeed. And so it was about a year ago I did that. So I've been on my own for about a year. Obviously.
How's that working out for you?
It's working out really good. It's obviously very stressful. It's obvious every day you wake up, I wake up in the middle of the night. Oh, did I file this? Did I miss that deadline? When you're working for somebody, who cares? It's not my malpractice insurance.
He's like, who cares?
Not that I don't care, but it's not.
I understand. It's not the same thing.
It's not. I'm not going to get sued. Yeah. But when you're on your own, you're going to get sued if you screw up. If you miss a deadline, if you blow a case, it's you. It's your license. It's yourself. Yeah. So from that perspective, obviously it's stressful. And the hours you put in, that unlimited amount of hours. My wife will tell you that.
Okay. I want to talk about probate. What is probate for all the listeners out there?
I think most people have never heard that word. Yeah. I think the majority of the public has never heard that word. Your listeners, a little more educated on these issues. Probate is when someone dies, and automatically when you die, there is something that's created called an estate. Yeah. That's your estate. The estate of Adam Trapiti. Okay. Mm-hmm. And what that is, it's everything you own. Mm-hmm. Everything you own is part of your estate. Yeah. So if you don't have a trust or some other techniques you can use as a lawyer or real estate agent, if you don't have any estate plan, everything you own goes into your estate, and then you need a lawyer to go file it's a case. It's like a lawsuit called a probate. It's a specialized court. It's a specific court just for probate that exists in Clark County and elsewhere, obviously. But what it is the how do you deal with the property of someone who passes away? Yeah. If I die tomorrow, my house, who gets it?
So what you're saying, if there's not a trust or some sort of will within that trust, right? Somebody passes away, family member. So now the courts has to handle it some way. You can't just pass it to the next kin. Is that correct?
Right. You can't just sign a deed and say, yeah, well, my father owned this house, but he died, so now I'm going to, give it to my sister. You can't do anything like that. The court has to approve any transfer. And, this is a real estate discussion, so I'll keep it to real.
Yeah. I just got a question. Why, I understand there's laws, but why would there not be where, like, we understand your kin or your next of kin? Why wouldn't they just say, you know what, there is somebody around? Like, I could see if
automatically transfer it without going through the whole process.
Why does it got to go through that whole thing?
Because they got to make money.
Well, it's the truth, though. I mean,
it is the truth.
So, lawyers have to make money.
Yeah, and also
I'm not trying to call you out, but I'm just saying.
No, this has existed. This process existed for hundreds of years. It's kind of just a way to make sure nothing funny happens. Make sure that nobody gets screwed out of their inheritance. Because, let's say a father passes away and he's got two sons.
Who gets it?
Who gets
50-50.
Okay, but what if son A runs to the courthouse, runs to the recorder's office with a deed
and files it
says,
first?
no, Dad wanted me to have it.
Just have him say, you know what? It doesn't matter. It's 50-50. Next of kin.
Who says that?
Just the law says it. You put a law in place that says this is percentage. It doesn't matter who does what. The percentage is you get 50%, and you get 50%.
Now, what if I pass away with no children? What if I pass away tomorrow?
Well, then maybe that's when it comes into play. And that's what I was saying. Maybe Dan, there's a purpose for that.
To alleviate all this is the reason why you have a living trust, right? So we're going to get into that later on. Yeah. But I want to focus on this probate. So let's just say if somebody out there had a family member that had passed away.
Right.
And we have siblings, okay? We have this property. What is the next step? Do I just come to you and say, hey, look, here's my dad's estate, right? He's passed away.
Yep.
Here's the death certificate. We have this property. We all agree that we're going to sell it and split it. So walk us through that part of that transaction, because now you're going to have to deal with a real estate agent because you're not going to put it on the market yourself. Right. So an agent comes in. Kind of show us behind the scenes of that.
So somebody passes away. So my father passes away.
Yeah.
He owns a house. Me and my brothers, we don't know what to do. We go to an attorney. What do we do? Okay, well, first step is like you said. Number one is you need the death certificate to prove someone actually passed away.
Yeah.
Without that, then, no one's going to believe you.
Mm-hmm.
The second question is who, or was there any sort of estate plan? Did you have a trust? Was there a will? Was there any sort of deed or anything else in writing anywhere that explains what your father wanted?
Yeah.
That I need to know. I need to know the answer to those questions because that will dictate where the property goes, where it ends up.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I have to review those documents if they exist.
Okay.
If there's a trust, that's easy.
Okay.
I mean, there's the complications that come in, but generally speaking, a trust will avoid the entire mess of probate.
I mean, do you still even have to go through probate if you have a trust and a will? I mean, do you still have to go to the court and go through that process?
Probably not.
Okay.
No, not if you have a trust. If you actually have the trust.
Yeah.
People lose a trust, and then you're screwed. But if you actually have the trust, the physical document, or even maybe an electronic one, you can get away with. But if you have the trust and it says, and it explains in there, and it's properly signed and notarized, and all the formalities are done correctly, then no, you do not need to go through probate. And a trust is much cheaper and much quicker than going through probate.
And I've noticed a lot of people will skimp and not spend the money on the trust. And I understand, because you may have that one property, you don't have that many assets, but when you start accumulating assets as you get older, this is something that I would also highly recommend, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to build a whole real estate portfolio for everybody to get a piece of it. You know what I'm saying? It's better to dictate and control it. Like, I literally have mine spelt out. Mm-hmm. Who gets what, but before you get this, you got to be at this age.
Right.
You got to read these books, right? You can't just liquidate everything. Like, that's how far I got this thing broken down.
You got books to be read?
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty deep.
Yeah, my nieces and nephews, they got to read certain books.
I've never seen that in a trust.
Yeah.
What's the top three?
Well, I don't know exactly what the top three was, but there's actually a couple books that I want them to read. There's a certain age, and also they're not allowed to liquidate all the properties. They got to work together and continue that cash flow. Do you see what I'm saying?
Kids do you have?
None.
I got a question for you too, real quick. So going back, before we get too far gone, as far as down the road, so estate selling a real estate house, right? Because we're talking real estate.
Yep.
How does it get to that point, and who represents that house?
So what you have is, assuming that you have to go through probate, there's no trust. Okay. Yeah. So this is an important point I just want to make first. Even if you have a will, you still have to go through probate.
Yes.
A will does not get you past probate. You need a trust or a deed upon death. That's a different thing, but you need a trust or something else. A will doesn't do it. But okay, let's assume you have no estate planning. Let's assume you die tomorrow, you own a house, and you didn't do any trust or will or anything. So what happens is you go to the lawyer. I file a petition for probate. I get you appointed as the personal representative of the estate of the person, of the deceased person. Once that's done, then you can sell the house. So at that point, you get your realtor, you sign your listing agreement.
So you have the same process. You just have to appoint to somebody to do it, and then recognize it through probate. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, with added steps. Specifically, the probate court has to approve it. So there's a judge. Judge has to say, yay or nay on your sale. And, unless there's something really weird going on, unless you're selling a property for a quarter of its value or something crazy, it's not an arm's length transaction.
You have to get an appraisal on it too? Before?
You can do an appraisal or you can waive the appraisal.
A lot of these attorneys, what I notice up front, they want the buyer in tow to already do the appraisal before submitting everything, do the inspections, and basically they want to cross the T's and dot their I's and negotiate the deal all up front. I literally just did one, and we had to do all that up front, which was a good attorney. I'm not going to tell you who the attorney was, but the funny thing about it was he had sent me some paperwork because obviously when you go to court, they have to send you the filings and the paperwork. He did send over the wrong address. So I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But he still was a good attorney because, we were the buyer in tow. And like I said, we basically had to do everything up front. But the challenge here is that even though you have a buyer in tow, somebody could literally come in and purchase the property throughout the process of the probate for more money.
This was where I was going next.
Yeah.
We call it the overbidding process. It's kind of like an auction. So what happens is you file a petition with the court to approve your sale. Okay. So the lawyer files paperwork, says, I have this guy under contract. He's going to buy my house for $500,000. So yes, you get a court date. Let's say the court date is September 1st. Now, any member of the public, any person in the universe can come in and bid on that property. They have to bid over the contract price. You follow me? So if I'm under contract to sell for 500, they have to come in with 505 or something like that.
Is there any point where you can eliminate that part of it?
No, there is.
So if it goes to probate and you're selling a house, so you have X amount of time, somebody can come in and outbid you.
Yep.
Yeah.
But what if you have like proven documents, like, okay, they've done all the probate steps, everything is in place. Somebody still has the ability.
It's just part of the process.
Yeah, because the judge, his part, he wants to get you as much as money as possible, right? Obviously.
That's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
The judge is overseeing everything, wants to make sure everything's on the up and up, and you get maximum value for your house. But I get why that's a weird.
Well, it's like let's say you got family, right? And they went through probate and they did all the steps and they sent out the letters, and everybody's like, okay, we agree that this is probably your house, and we got a date now, a court date. So now you're sitting on pins and needles till September, and it's like, well, that was my grandfather's house or my uncle's house or whatever it was.
Yeah, we're just talking about if you sell the house.
Yeah.
There is also the process. You don't have to sell a house in probate. You could just transfer it.
Yeah.
So if my grandfather's house goes through probate, I could say, I want grandpa's house, and if everybody agrees that Adam is supposed to get grandpa's house,
even through probate, but not with a trust. I mean, with a trust, it's bulletproof.
With a trust, forget it. You don't have to do any of this.
Yeah.
But in a probate, you can sell the property or you can just transfer it out. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to sell grandpa's house. You could keep grandpa's house in the family. But if you choose to sell grandpa's house, even if you're under contract, you could still go over that amount if someone overbids you.
I mean, that's kind of a bummer on the buying side, because I had to inform my buyer that this could actually happen. And also the timeline is not like 35 days. For us to close this transaction literally took us, I think it was 120 days.
Yeah, that's what's going on right now. It wasn't always like this.
Yeah, and 120 days for me was pretty good. But then she also had risk of, she paid for the appraisal, right? And also she paid for the home inspection. So you could literally lose out on that money.
Yeah.
That's the downfall. Yeah.
It wasn't like this until COVID hit, by the way.
And I noticed a lot of buyers, they think they can get a really good deal. But unfortunately, you're not going to get a good deal, especially in today's market, because first thing is an appraisal is going to be done, comps are going to be pulled, and the judge is going to look at it and say, hey, look, the home's worth $1 million. Why would we give it to you for $500,000?
Yeah, and I personally, I haven't seen that situation happen because most people are not going to sell the property for. Yeah. Why would they? That doesn't benefit them.
Exactly.
Right? So, but yeah, I imagine that a judge would not approve a sale for half of the fair market value. They want to see comps. They want to see things before you can sell the house.
Now, I want to jump right into this. So, to protect yourself, right, for bullet point, you definitely need some sort of trust. You got living trust. You got revocable trust. What's the difference between those two?
There is no difference. I mean, there's multiple types of trust.
Okay.
You have a revocable trust, an irrevocable trust. Revocable trust is what 95% of people are going to get.
Yeah.
Because irrevocable is complicated. It's only there if you have significant assets and you're trying to protect them from creditors, that kind of thing. There's also something called the Nevada Asset Protection Trust. There's very complicated, expensive trusts that most are not necessary for most people. So most of the time, I'm going to recommend a revocable trust.
Okay.
And that is what it sounds like. You can revoke it. You can revoke it at any time in your life. You could do whatever you want with the trust.
Okay.
You could amend it. You could revoke it. You could change. Okay, my daughter is a jerk now. Now I don't want her to have anything now.
Which is probably the best one, it sounds like.
That's what I recommend to most people because for most people, that will get the job done.
So once you create that, it sounds like that you should create your will and have that in the trust. Is that correct?
So it's a separate concept.
Yeah.
And technically, if you have a trust, you don't even need a will.
Okay.
Because what's a trust? A trust is a document that avoids probate and it names your heirs within the documents in the trust. So what purpose does a will serve? Well, to me, a will is a backup to a trust.
Okay.
You don't technically need it, but it's helpful if something happened to your trust or there's certain things a will can do that a trust cannot do. It depends on your situation, your circumstances. But number one thing is the trust.
Okay.
Okay. But the main thing to remember is if you have a trust, you don't have to go through probate. And I tell my clients this when they come in, you want to pay me this much now or you want to pay me 5 times more later? Because probate, first of all, right now, 120 days, right? It takes a year or more to get through a regular probate that used to take, 60, 90 days. Now now we're talking about a year because of COVID, because whatever other boring, stuff happened with the law. It's not how it was before and it takes forever. Whereas if you have a trust, you sign a deed, it's done.
How much is an average trust?
So if it's just a basic trust, maybe between $2,000 and $2,500, something
That's
like
actually not that bad if you think about it.
It's a lot cheaper than a probate because probate, you're looking at if it's a decently valued house, you were talking about a house worth $400,000 or $500,000 and there's equity in that house. You're going into, $8-10 grand for a probate and you're waiting a year.
Yeah.
So you can't do anything with that house for a year. Then people are always worried, well, if the person who owned the house died, who's going to pay the mortgage? All these kinds of questions. People, of course, you have questions like that. And the answer is, as long as you're paying the bank, they like money. Banks like money. Just keep sending that check to the bank and they'll take it. But, that's uncertainty for a year.
Okay.
During the probate process.
Now let's talk about when somebody has a lot of property, right? What would you advise them? When you have multiple properties as an investor, you want to protect all these assets, right? So what type of entity do you actually put these things in?
So there's a few ways to do it. What I think is nice and unique to Nevada is we have something called a Series LLC. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, I've got a few of them actually.
Okay, there you go. So
I was setting you up for this question.
All right. Yeah, well, I hit it. So,
yeah, you did.
Yeah, so I'll explain what a Series LLC. So traditionally, you buy one, you open an LLC.
Yeah,
you have to pay the Secretary of State $525, whatever it is. So for each LLC, you have to have, pay the fee, and you have to every year you got to pay $350 and blah blah all this crap. Instead of doing that for each property, so if you have 10 properties, that's thousands of dollars a year. Okay, plus you got to go on the website 10 times and update your stuff 10 times. Instead of that, just get a Series LLC. And what that is you have the main LLC. So we'll call that, main LLC. And then within that, you have subsections, which is like each series. So Series A LLC owns 123 Main Street. The Series B of the LLC owns 234 Main Street or whatever. So you go down the line and instead of having all these fees, you only have one fee to pay up front and one fee to pay each year.
So basically, you have the main LLC. It's like a branch on a tree. So you put each property in Series 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a reason why we do that. Explain that reason why.
The reason why you want to have each property in a different series is for liability purposes. So if somebody falls in a house that's in Series A and they sue you, they can't reach the house in Series B or Series C or Series D.
So you just lose that one if worst case scenario.
Yeah, you're looking at it, and as a lawyer, that's what I always tell people. My job is to think of the worst case scenario. And people say, well, maybe I could get away with that. Maybe you could. But what if you don't? So, you got to think about the worst case scenario. So the worst case scenario is you own 10 houses in one LLC, and John Doe falls in one house. Now he sues you, and he gets all 10 houses. Right?
Yeah.
You don't want that. So instead, you have a Series LLC, and in Series A, John Doe falls in the house that's in the first part of it. He sues you. Worst case scenario is he only gets the house in Series A or the equity or whatever the judgment says he gets.
So on that series, let's just say series, the main series, you control that asset. Should you be controlling that asset, or should you have a trust where the trust controls that asset? So now it becomes another layer of an onion. So how does that work?
So you can do that. You can have a trust. You can have that series LLC, the whole thing inside of a trust.
Yeah.
And so it does a couple things. First of all, it offers another layer of protection. Second of all, it's kind of a way to have privacy.
Yeah.
So, because something I've learned, and I mentioned the assessor site before, is I can find anybody, right?
Yeah.
So I go and I type in 123 Main Street on the assessor's website. Now I know who owns that. But sometimes, an LLC will own the house. Okay, well, I don't know who that is, right?
Yeah.
I can go to the Secretary of State website.
Yeah, you can see
right?
who's the managing members.
Who's the managing members of that LLC? Well, if you have the Main Street Trust as the managing member, I'm not aware of any place you can find the owners or members or trustees of a trust. Yeah. So it provides that kind of privacy, and that's very valuable to some people. Some people don't want anyone knowing what they own for a variety of reasons.
Now, what I noticed, one thing is that you have to file these on a consistent basis, right? And you don't want to miss your filings, and you always want to be on track, right?
Right.
With your deadlines, because it could literally get null and void. Am I correct?
You're talking about it like if you go default on your...
Yeah, because it seems like every year we always have to make these fees to the county.
Yeah.
And like especially with like the trust, there's certain paperwork you got to fill out. You got to file it on time. Could that hurt you if you don't do your minutes and all that stuff? Because you got to file the minutes with the managing members.
Yeah.
But obviously I have my own attorney that just handles all that.
Right.
But if you do it yourself, which is, I'm saying that for me, I'm so busy, I don't know.
Sure.
So that's one of the services that I think you pretty much offer, right?
Right. So I could do a few things. I could be your registered agent for service of process, or, like you're saying, I could refile every year. I have clients I do that for, a number of clients. Okay, your time is up for this year. You don't want your entity to get revoked, your LLC to get revoked, so don't go into default status. Go in default status, they're going to hit you with penalties and fees and things like that. Just take care of it as it comes up, so this way you don't have to deal with it later.
Now I want to talk about asset protection. So here's a different entity, right, with asset protection, correct? So let's talk about that, and why would you actually need that? Give us an example.
So an asset protection type of trust, the purpose of that is exactly what it sounds like. Asset protection. People have this question all the time. A regular revocable living trust, revocable living trust, does that give me asset protection? Not really.
Yeah.
I call those kind of probate avoidance trusts.
Yeah.
Is what it sounds like. If you have an asset protection trust, this is, first of all, they're quite expensive.
Yeah.
Okay. They're for people who have a higher net worth usually.
Yeah.
And the reason to have one is because you have assets that you don't want anyone to get.
Correct.
So if you're in business and you think you might get sued, or you have whatever, you could be anyone with money is a target.
Yeah.
Right? If you have $30 million net worth, somebody's going to try to find a way to get that, separate you from that money. So the asset protection trust offers ways for you to make it harder for them to reach that money. Anyone who wants to get that money.
Typically, wealthy individuals will have their LLC, the series LLC, in that asset protection trust. Then they will also have the trust governing the asset protection. So it's a layer over a layer over a layer.
Right.
And a lot of them now will also have umbrella insurance on top of that.
Yes.
So it's just like one thing after another. But I understand, because it's like, it's you work so hard to create a real estate portfolio, right? You work so hard to create this lifestyle, but then now you also have to protect that too as well. I noticed that.
You become a target. Yeah.
Yeah, you really do.
So that's something that people have to worry about when they're in that bracket.
Okay. So like if somebody's just like getting started, right? They just bought their first home, right?
Correct.
Obviously, they would be protected through homestead to a certain extent, right? So what
up
would
to
be
$605,000?
Oh, there's actually a limit.
Yeah, it used to be $550 for a
I didn't even notice.
Okay, so let me explain.
Explain.
All right, so right now the law is your home that you live in, not a rental property. Your home that you live in is protected up to $605,000 of equity in that home.
Look at I just learned something new.
Okay, so What does that mean? That means if you get a judgment against somebody, sues you and they win a $500,000 judgment against you, they can't force you to sell that house. They cannot go to the sheriff and do a sheriff sale. They can't do any of that because it's not over that amount. Now, if you go over that amount, that's when you get into trouble. So if you own a $500,000 house and you get $1 million judgment against you, and there's all that equity in there. No, I did it backwards. If you own $1 million house, and somebody gets a judgment against you, they can force a sale of that house if there's that equity. There's long story short, if you have over $600,000 in equity in your house,
they can go after.
They can go after that house. Whereas if it's under that amount, that's the homestead amount. Okay, so you got to be very careful. You got to watch those type of things if you think that you're a target for a judgment.
Wow. So what do you do when you just bought your first home and a couple of years later you do have that equity position, but you don't have that kind of money? Like what do you do? Just go get a trust? I mean, like what do you do? What do you advise?
I mean, it's not an easy situation. You just try not to get sued. How's that? But, you just got to be careful. You can try to do asset protection trust. If you have the money for that, you can do that. Right? But those are complicated. There's different trustees you have to have in place, and you might lose some control over your assets to an extent. You have to get a professional trustee. So it's complicated. But for most people, I don't think it's an issue. For people that it is an issue, then talk to an attorney for sure about those options. An asset protection trust is an option, but it's an expensive option, so it's not for everybody.
Well, I don't think $2,500. You know what? I'm lying, because when I first started my career, the reason why I never got one at that time, because $2,500 is a lot of money. It really was, actually. So
you're starting out. But that's not what I'm talking about. That's the regular trust.
No, I got you. I'm just talking about like in general.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're just getting your life started, you just, got a property and you want to cover your assets.
Going back to your question was about, if you're just getting started, what do you do with that? You mentioned homestead. That's one thing. But the options are, there's not 100 options. There's a few options, but a homestead protects you, an asset protection trust protects you. You want to do things like series LLC if you can. Put your property, any investment property goes into an LLC because of the liability. You don't want to have that in your personal lien. That's opening you up to a lot of problems. So make sure you get that investment property into an LLC.
So once you close on the home, and what you're saying here is you don't want it under your name, right?
If that's one of your goals.
Yeah, because if somebody does get hurt on your property, but then you have $1 million in the bank, the attorney gets wind of it. He can actually go after the home and also the additional asset that's in the account, correct?
Potentially, yes.
So is that the reason why you would move that property into an LLC?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I noticed on the loan, right, there's actually a due on sales clause. Am I correct, Dan?
Yeah.
Now, when somebody buys a home, on that contract, on that deed, it says that if you transfer from one entity to another, it's a due on sales clause. So how does somebody prevent that if they're doing the financing part, right? Because you're saying it's best to transfer it over to an LLC.
Yes.
So how do you avoid that without the lenders coming back at you?
Well, let me ask you, Dan, have you seen that clause invoked?
Never.
That's kind of where I come from.
Yeah, it's kind of like jaywalking.
I've never seen it invoked. Maybe you can light me a little bit. My understanding is the purpose of that is kind of try to avoid fraudulent activity.
That's all it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've never seen it come back to bite somebody if they transfer their property to an LLC that they have complete control over.
Yeah. Now I want to go back to this homestead. That's another way to protect yourself, but obviously they can't evict you out of your property. But they could file a lien or judgment against your property. So when you sell it, they'll get their money one way or another. Am I correct?
Yes.
Wow.
Yep. So if you get a judgment against you, that gets recorded. It can be recorded against your home. And if I go to sell my house 10, 20, 30 years from now, if that judgment's still on there and it's been properly renewed, which it has to be every 6 years, assuming that has been done, that person who holds that judgment, eventually they'll get paid if there's equity in the house. And
I've seen that a couple of times where we're selling a home and somebody has like a $20,000 judgment. Oh, yeah. And we can sell the home, but they're going to get paid regardless.
Let's get paid off.
Yeah, it's just kind of crazy.
Same with liens too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been on both sides of that. I've It's judgment creditor and judgment debtor. I've been the person, I've represented the person who has the judgment. Yeah. And we just go record it against the house. Was it $44 to record the documents or record the judgment? Mm-hmm. And then you got to monitor that. Like I said, it has to, if you don't renew it within 6 years, it expires.
I did that once. I filed for a lis pendens on a property where one of my clients, we submitted an offer. And this is probably like 6-7 years ago when the market was actually like, we had like over like, I would say maybe 14,000 homes. And this is when like investors started coming in and started buying everything. And this guy was flipping a property. So we put like $5,000. And this home was like probably like 180 at that time, right? Now it's probably like worth 600, right? Yeah. And we met all our timelines, but we canceled out of the deal. And I was requesting to get back to earnest money deposit. And this guy was such a jerk, this investor. He would not release it because the title company, third party, you still have to sign off on a form, even though you meet your deadlines, your due diligence period, right? Yep. So he didn't want to give us the money. So I said, oh, okay. So we played cool for like 2-3 days. And he put the property back on the market. And I noticed it went into contingent status. So we went to go file for lis pendens against the property. Then I found out who the title company was. And I said, hey, Mr. Escrow Officer, just to let you know, I filed for lis pendens. It's recorded with the county. And I did it the day before they were going to record. Wow. Dude was freaking pissed. Yeah. So they basically gave back the $5,000.
They gave it back?
And it was great because the client, right? Because $5,000, back then is a lot of money. Especially when you're buying your first home.
Oh, yeah.
Like you're saving your money.
That'll set you back.
Exactly. Big time. So I felt like I was a superstar, dude.
Yeah.
She praised me. She loved me. But we still bought another home. But she just thought I was the shit. I thought I was the shit, too.
That's really
but I literally got him at the end. But he was pissed.
I've done EMD disputes.
Yeah.
So, most of the time, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Unless you have an expensive property.
Yeah.
Okay? And you have 50 or 100,000 EMD. Mm-hmm. Unless that's a situation, it's usually not worth it because the lawyer fees will eat all that up. And I've done that. I've litigated them. And those are tough. Those are tough. Yeah. Yeah. And it wasn't worth it. I'll just put it that way. It was not worth it for either side. But can I kind of, I just want to say something about that lis pendens.
Yeah.
So lis pendens technically only relates to title to the property. I don't know if are you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. So really what you did was not 100% up and up, but you know what? It worked.
Yes, it worked.
And I get it. So I don't blame you for doing it. But
because the title company, right, they didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. Because the title company is there to insure the title, right? Because you don't want that chain to be broken, right? And that's what we're going to talk about, quiet the title. So let's get right into that. What is quiet title?
So the really easy way to explain it is you have two, I'm just going to make an example, two people who each claim that each of them has a claim to, each of them claim a title to the property. So you have two guys and one guy says, I own it. The other guy says, no, I own it.
Yeah.
Well, how do you settle that? That's
boxing match.
That's that's one way. And the other way is a quiet title lawsuit.
Okay.
So person A sues person B for quiet title. And ultimately what happens at the end of that case is the judge will probably say either this person owns it or that person owns it. So that's how, and these can come up in any number of situations, a contract dispute or someone dies, like a probate situation. You might have a quiet title involved with a probate because maybe the guy had a will or maybe he didn't. And, you could have different situations, but essentially it comes down to who owns the property. That's what a quiet title dispute is there to resolve.
And how often do you deal with something like that in this state?
A lot, because in this state, there's a lot of title disputes. People claim, I own this property or I own a portion of this property, or maybe the deed was written up a certain way and then, somebody screwed it up along the way, or there was a wrong legal description. Oh, you don't own the whole thing. You only own this portion.
Well, wouldn't the title company be responsible for that? Because that's what you're paying for is that title insurance.
Sometimes people don't get title insurance. Sometimes people are unwise and they don't use a real estate agent in their transaction. And 9 times out of 10, that's where a quiet title lawsuit, that's most of my clients for title disputes is because somebody decided that they were smart enough and wanted to save the money, the 2% or 3% on a real estate agent. That's where most of them come in. So I used to work for that judge and we would have people come in, right? Parties to a lawsuit. these people decided, I'm not going to pay a lawyer. Maybe they couldn't pay a lawyer, or maybe they thought they were smarter than a lawyer, or whatever. But the judge would look at these people, and he would treat them fairly. He would treat them 100% fair. But what he would say is, it's like if you needed brain surgery, would you perform brain surgery on yourself, or would you hire a professional, a doctor, to perform, a surgeon?
Well, depending on the cost.
Well, there you go. Depending on how valuable your brain is to you. But the point is, you want to hire a professional person. You want to hire a lawyer or a doctor or a real estate agent. And when you don't, I'm not saying every one of those situations winds up in a lawsuit, because people do for sale by owner or whatever all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit dangerous, because a lot of these investors will like flip properties or buy properties, off the market. And a lot of times what they'll do is a quick claim deed.
Yeah.
And the problem is that when you start doing that, the title company that you originally went with, that you have title insurance, there's actually a clause on there. If you do that, you can actually avoid your title insurance.
Right.
And that's actually a big no-no. But a lot of people are not aware of that. But I'm not saying that you can or can't do it, but it's just something that you need to be aware of. And that's probably how that could possibly happen, right?
Right. Yeah. So you can do a quick claim deed, which doesn't carry with it the same assurances of a grand bargain sale deed, that, instead of going through the escrow process and having a title search performed, you just decide, I'm going to quick claim it over to this guy.
Yeah.
I've had many quiet title or litigation lawsuits, whatever title you want to put on it, where people just decided they were going to sell something outside of escrow.
Okay.
And also you get situations, fraud.
Really?
Fraud, title fraud, or somebody, fake. I've had fake notary stamp cases where somebody puts a notary stamp on literally just a completely fake notary stamp. The recorder accepts it, and then you got years of litigation. These things happen frequently, and I've dealt with them, and they're not pretty, and they're expensive, and they're stressful, and they drag on and on and on.
Dude, you must make a lot of money.
Well,
you must be balling.
Not as much as I like to. I'm doing okay.
All right. Well, I definitely want my audience to support you for sure. So
appreciate that.
Next time you roll up, I want to see a Lamborghini.
I'll try.
Okay.
Lambo.
Try. You're going to make it happen.
Try law. See?
Now, here's the thing. I want to talk about evictions, because this is important. Okay. There's a lot of landlords out there, especially what was going on, during this coronavirus situation. If somebody does not pay your rent, how do you start the eviction process? Like, what should you do?
If I'm a landlord,
the
first thing I'm doing is I'm going to try to get in touch with my tenant. And so this is more of a practical point. This isn't the legal part, but people come to me all the time with these types of questions, and my first response is always the path of least resistance. See what's going on. Yeah. See what's going on with the tenant. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe there's something. If that doesn't work, then you got to go the legal route. So then what you do is you hire a company to go post a 7-day pay rent or quit notice. That's the first step in the process.
What are those guys called, where they go and drop off the letter?
You're talking about a process server?
Yeah, I think, no, there's another name for that, where they go and drop it off. And they're like, here, take it. And you're like, I ain't taking it. What are those guys called?
I don't know.
Anyway, but go ahead. All
right. So, that's the first thing is you get a guy to go physically put a piece of paper on the front door that says, pay your rent within 7 days.
Do they have to sign off on it, or you could just put it on the door?
You just if the process server, the guy will ring the doorbell, or he'll knock on the door, or whatever, and try to serve the individual with the notice. But if they don't answer, then they're well within their rights to just post that notice right on the door.
And that's still legal, right? They don't physically have to sign it saying that they received it, correct?
Nope. You just post it on there. Best practice would be take a picture of it on the door, right?
Yeah.
So you can prove that it was actually on there. But that's all you need. And then you get a sworn statement from the process server saying, yes, I put that notice on that door on this date at this time. I tried to knock. No one was there. So I left the notice there. That's the first step.
Okay.
Then they have 7 days. 7
to
days,
respond.
7 days to either pay rent or to get out. And if they don't do either of those things, then the landlord has to go file for losing it here, but he has to go file with the court to get the person out of the house, basically. Okay.
So now you would have to hire an attorney to do something like that, right?
Yes.
Instead of trying to file it yourself?
You don't want to do it yourself. That's the last thing you want to do. There's evictions. It took me a long time to realize that evictions are tricky.
Okay. Because I noticed a lot of people know how to beat the system too, it seems like.
That's true. There's so many stories about that. And there's lots of companies who will, pro bono services that will help tenants, legally do things that can prolong their time in that property.
But I think this state is a landlord state. Is that correct?
Yeah,
from what I'm hearing.
I mean, it's starting to go in the other direction. It's starting. It's not there, but a couple of years ago, especially during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, there was a ton of talk about in the legislature. Oh well, let's expand the time frames. Let's give more tenants' rights. Pretty much tenants' rights. Give them more time in the property. If you go to New York or California, for instance, I have a good landlord friend in California who owns a bunch of apartments over there. Mm-hmm. I mean, the horror stories that I hear. Horror stories from a landlord perspective. There's groups, there's tenant rights groups, and there's all sorts of things that that they do. It's almost like a unionized situation. So they group together. There are attorneys who specialize in that, defending tenants.
Yeah.
And same thing in New York. Those are two states I know best outside of us. So
now, how long does it take to evict somebody, like from start to ending?
There's variables. Okay, so let's just, there's a bunch of different types of evictions, first of all. There's lease violations, there's nuisance, there's failure to pay rent, there's at-will tenancy. There's no cause, which is just no reason, get out. So, that's
get out.
Just get out.
Yeah.
So, that's if you don't have a lease. But
yeah.
Let's just use the failure to pay rent. So you post that 7-day notice on the door. They don't respond in 7 days. If they don't do anything, then you can go to the courthouse and you should be able to get an order within 48 hours or so. Give that to the constable. Constable goes to the house and says, get out. You have, whatever amount of time. So in that instance, you're talking about probably 2 weeks. But if if the tenant files an answer or a response or something with the court, then you're looking at a couple months.
Months. But then who pays for that back months of all that mortgage that you couldn't pay for? So are you eating that as a landlord?
Yes, unless you can go get a judgment against the tenant for failure to pay rent. And I'm not anti-tenant, but a lot of tenants don't have the money to pay a judgment, satisfy a judgment.
Yeah.
So at that point, there's a good chance the landlord is going to be out some money there.
Ooh. So oh wow. Go ahead.
I think you were saying about the constable. That's what you were asking.
Yeah, constable.
Right.
But
okay. That's
what you're trying to say about.
Yeah, the constable. The constable does the lockout. That's a government entity.
Okay.
That will go they get the court order directly from the judge. The judge sends the order over to the constable. The constable takes that to the property and evicts the person. Physically removes if necessary. So.
Yeah. Now I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what I heard. If you do have a tenant in place and you're going through the court process, if the rent is $1,000 and they give you at least $300 or something, like just say some sort of dollar amount, you shouldn't be taking it as a landlord, right? You shouldn't even take it, right?
It's too risky. I would not accept partial rent.
Yeah.
I would not accept. If I was advising a landlord, I would tell them don't take it. Mm-hmm. Unless you like the tenant, you want the tenant there, you want to give them a chance. Okay, sure, that's a different story. But if your goal is to evict the tenant, I would not take partial rent, because now you're talking about, well, the tenant might be able to convince the judge, well, he took partial payment, and the judge might be persuaded. Okay, well, give him another 30 days, and then now you lost 30 days over $300. Yeah. So I wouldn't advise it. It's risky. Is it 100% wrong? No, but it's not worth it.
All right, let's talk a little bit about HOA laws.
Yeah.
How does this work? Because we have first, second, third lien position, but it takes seniority for the first lien position. But does that take over the lien position of the county with property taxes?
No, the county takes first position.
Always takes first position.
County always takes first position.
So basically, at the end of the day, you will always pay taxes from the day you die. And the day you die, you're still paying taxes.
Death and taxes, right?
So basically how it works, what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, property taxes will always be in first lien position. About 85% of the homes now will have an HOA, so that's first lien position. Then you have the mortgage first lien. Then you have the second lien if there's a second mortgage. Then whoever else is attached, correct?
Almost correct. It's a little more complicated.
Yeah.
There's some nuance in there. So yes, taxes, number one. You got to think about IRS too. If they have a lien on a person,
So would that be more seniority of the HOA? Obviously, it would be more seniority of the first mortgage, but does it supersede the HOA?
It's complicated. It's a complicated.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's little things at play in there, but let me just jump to the HOA.
Yeah.
So you're saying HOA takes precedent over the first deed of trust? Only sometimes.
Okay.
So
explain.
So like I was saying earlier, when I was doing a ton of this HOA foreclosure litigation, I mean that's all I did for a couple of years, and there was a development in the law over time. So initially, it was the Supreme Court came out with a bombshell ruling, oh, well, the HOA foreclosure wipes out the first deed of trust. Now, that's true, but the laws have changed since then. Banks have gotten a lot smarter since then, and they protect their first deed of trust. I mean, you're talking about a $500,000, whatever.
They're going to get some sort of notice. So if it has to be paid, that's the reason why there's some sort of impound in there to pay it, right?
They're required to get notice of an HOA lien. And there's months and months and months in that process. It doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. So what I'm getting at is talking about priority specifically.
Yeah.
The HOA has priority unless certain things happen. So nowadays the banks, unless they make some sort of huge error, the banks will 100% of the time pay off what's called a super priority lien.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard that term. So that is only. It's been a year or two since I looked at this, but it's only supposed to be the, I think it's the 9 months. 9 months of assessments. That's all the bank has to pay off. So this is how it works mechanically. The bank sends a check to the HOA for 9 months worth of HOA assessments. And what that does is now that gives the bank priority.
Okay.
You got me?
So if they're still late after the 9 months, as long as they pay their 9 months, they go directly straight to first lien position.
Yep. Now the HOA lien does not wipe out the mortgage.
Okay.
You got it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and this took years of development.
Why did it happen before where they took over those mortgages? Like they
wiped out the mortgage.
Right. Why?
Yeah, because in 1991, the Nevada legislature passed the Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act. What that means in English, they passed this set of laws, which a lot of states passed, that said exactly what I was just saying, which is that under these particular circumstances, the HOA lien wipes out the mortgage because that was the law.
Well, they were selling houses for $20,000.
The HOA.
Yeah, the HOA was. Yeah, $10,000. People were like, I can't,
So the policy, because I see you're thinking there. So the policy behind it was to protect HOAs, because if the HOA doesn't have money, that's a problem. If you have 20 houses in the community that have dried up brown lawns and broken windows and destroyed roofs, that ruins the value of the property value for everybody, right? So the idea, this was the theory. The theory is if we allow the HOA to foreclose, it will entice the bank to pay it off, right? Because the bank doesn't want to lose their $500,000 mortgage, right? Then they don't want to lose their first position, so they'll pay off the HOA super priority. That was the idea behind it.
But the bad news about this is what I noticed when that happened is a lot of these HOAs now, they think, I'm going to say they think they're the shit. And what I mean by that is you can have somebody on the board that picks every little thing. And it's like, if you don't do it, we're going to constantly send you a fine. Which is, there's got to be a fine line between that, because what I've noticed, because I used to be on the board myself, right? And what happens is people on the board, they get personally involved, and sometimes it becomes a power trip.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's got to be some sort of fine line. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
because you can literally say, hey, I'm going to fine you, I'm going to fine you. Next thing you know, that disgruntled, owner of that property is like, dude, I'm not paying this. Next thing you know, home's foreclosed on.
So a couple things. So I just want to, the HOA cannot foreclose on fines.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know.
Only foreclose on assessments.
Okay.
So you're monthly, right? If you pay $100 a month to Green Valley Ranch HOA.
Didn't know that. Good information.
Yeah, so they don't foreclose on fines. They foreclose. Now they can get, the fines can be a lien on your property.
Okay.
Like a judgment.
Okay.
Right? So then they can go, when you go to sell your house, you got to pay the HOA back $20,000 in fines. And, nobody wants that when you're trying to make a certain nut on your house.
But I mean, still, at the end of the day, do you see like how it could be manipulated and how somebody can actually control you emotionally? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, this is like the number one thing people are most emotional about. When I get phone calls, is their HOA. Investors who own properties, they don't get as emotional. Yeah. But John Q. Public owns his house, and the HOA says, I mean, you saw that story about the guy that had Let's Go Brandon sticker. You see this one?
I think so.
Okay, he had it on his truck, not even on his house, on his truck, and the HOA came after him, and it's a huge thing. It's in the news, and I didn't know that they could come after you for a bumper sticker on your car. I thought it was just on your house, but
yeah, that's got to be a fine line. That's ridiculous.
So that's an example of the type of situations that I get phone calls about, and sometimes they're not easy to sort out. You got to go through the CC&Rs. You got to figure out these things. But the good thing is, to your point about like someone on the HOA, like the president or a board member could cause problems for everybody.
Yeah.
True. But the good thing is that there are management companies for the HOAs.
Yes.
There's lawyers advising the HOA and the management company. So most of the time you have some sort of level head or a professional person in the middle somewhere regulating, making sure that the HOA president doesn't go insane. I'm not saying 100% because these things do happen. I've represented HOAs and I've represented people that are pissed off at their HOAs. So I've seen both sides of this. But the point is that there are middlemen usually that can kind of be a barrier or a buffer between the HOA itself, the board, and the individual homeowner.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's not like you can have an HOA run wild, but at some point they're going to get into trouble or the ombudsman might get involved or whatever. Yeah. So it's good that you have somebody managing the HOA.
I think it's people just don't want to be told what to do.
Absolutely.
I think that's what the bottom line is. Like if I have a house, yeah, we're paying a fee, paying whatever it is. But if you're telling me what I'm going to do with my house, and I get it, you signed up for it. People maybe they don't know what's going on.
Well, you don't have a choice here.
You don't have a choice. Everything. Well, everything's north of 2000, 2000 for the most part as an HOA.
Yeah.
I just think people just take it personal, right? And then it becomes more of like
it is personal. It's your home.
Emotional.
It's absolutely.
That's why the magnitude goes as high as it does, and it's hard to take that and fizz that out.
I got a notice from my HOA a month ago.
Do they know you're an attorney?
I don't think so. I don't think they care. But but I got a notice.
Yeah.
And it said you left your garage. You had your garage door open
for 2 hours.
Whatever. They didn't even say how long. They just said the garage door is only supposed to be open for ingress and egress, getting in and out. And it's like, wow, I can't even have my garage door open. And so if I was somebody who didn't see this every day, I might get furious at that.
Yeah.
But I see these things all the time, and I realize, well, that's just crazy. I'm going to ignore this. I'm going to close my garage door. You happy now? Like, what do you want me to do? So it's very emotional. People get pissed off. I get it. I get annoyed too.
Yeah. One of the streets too, like there's HOAs that say you can't park at certain times. Now I'm going to say this. There is some things that are good. Like when you go to a street, it's like a big street and there's no cars parked everywhere on the side. It makes the street look more open.
100%.
And it makes it look more
inviting.
Inviting, exactly.
Yeah. It just looks better.
And I get it. Like you don't want to be told, but if you got a bunch of cars and you got, somebody renting your room or all these people and they're just parking everywhere, I get it. I mean, maybe there's
value to it. There is. It's a double-edged sword,
It is a little bit,
because some people want their neighborhood to look a particular way, and it does. I believe.
I think it's appealing.
I haven't read studies, but I would bet that it adds value to the community. I'm talking about dollar value, not just beautification, but it adds to the value of your home.
It looks cleaner, like that area looks cleaner. But I mean, there's some things like where I've seen people where they hang stuff over like their wall to like let it dry.
Right.
Here's a fine.
It goes overboard.
It's like, wait a second.
Crazy.
It's like, somebody's drying this. You know what I mean? Like, let the sun do its job.
There's no justification. Sometimes they just go berserk and it happens. And, my father got into a pissing contest once. And, it's just everybody. It's a very emotional topic. But there is value to it. They go too far sometimes. So it's one of those things. It's like any, hot topic. It's like you could kind of see both sides of the issue.
Judicial foreclosures. That's what it was, right? HOA. And that's how you countered it. Is that right?
So judicial foreclosure just means usually
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
The HOA foreclosures that we were talking about, those were not judicial. Those were it's called the non-judicial.
But you would take it to judicial to eliminate the HOA from
cloud on title.
Exactly.
So like we represented investors that bought these HOA foreclosures. And so, this guy bought a house for $5,000. Sounds insane. It's kind of insane. Mm-hmm. But what we would do is we would go to court, we file, because he couldn't get marketable title. He couldn't get clear title
to sell it.
No title company in 2013, let's say, would give you title insurance on an HOA foreclosure.
Right. Yeah,
it's like a hot potato or whatever term you want to use, because it was new. Nobody knew what was going on.
Yeah.
So that's
technically your property's not worth anything if you don't have clear title to a property.
It's
at that
virtually
point.
Worthless. I mean, you could probably sell it for pennies.
Isn't that crazy? Where if you don't have a correct title, if it's not clean, your property's really worth nothing.
I know.
Yeah, and that's where I come in.
Yeah.
Right? So you gotta So we would file lawsuits on behalf of the investor. Guy buys a house for $5,000. We file, and the bank says, the bank sometimes would file. So we were fighting banks every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day we would be suing banks, going to court, motions, trials, everything, every single day. Or we had cases against the United States of America, because IRS liens, things like that, or tax liens, all sorts of stuff. But it's a quiet title because my investor believed that he had proper title. The bank said, no, you don't get free and clear of our mortgage.
Yeah.
For $5,000, that's insanity, they would say.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out it wasn't insanity. But there's a lot of nuances.
There's also too where there in here in Nevada where banks were foreclosing. I think it was AB 284.
Okay.
And I think that's what it is. But they were foreclosing on people, and yet they didn't have a chain of title. So if you could prove that they were on there, you would actually take the house free and clear.
Now, is there a particular time frame? Was this like recently?
No, this was back in
during
the boom days.
During that time. I mean, and it's like, well, can you prove that because the title,
original node, original deed trust,
it has to be the original. And so they would be like, well, I can't do it. There's actually somebody that said, okay, prove that, and he got his house free and clear.
There were tons. That's when I was working in the courthouse. I would see these people come in. And a lot of times there were people who couldn't afford an attorney, but they were smart enough to figure out how to file a lawsuit and at least how to prevent, because they would talk about that stuff. Well, where's your note and deed of trust? Where are the documents?
It's what they wanted. And the lender that took the house or foreclosed on the house couldn't provide it.
Yeah.
Couldn't produce it.
Yeah, that happened all the time.
So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, I have my phone number is 702-337-3333. That's me. You'll talk to me. I got my website, trilawnv.com, TRILAWNV.com.
Cool. Adam, I really do appreciate you taking the time to come out here. You did provide a lot of information. In addition to that, I actually want to bring you back into studio, and I want to talk about these certain topics and really dive deep into it, because this is just a lot of information. So again, I really do appreciate it, and we'll definitely have to bring you back on.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, guys.
All right, guys, if you guys haven't had a chance to subscribe to this channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Until next week, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Other than that, I'm Chakits. Peace.